Hello there, Steve here in Sydney of the Lay Gnosis website, truebluehealer.com, where in just 20 minutes you can get immediate physical evidence of your own divine spark activation. Within a week you'll get some vivid messaging dreams, and within a few weeks you'll start to get the beginnings of an internal mentoring voice that can guide you to websites and things, music and people, to bring to you knowledge that you need to know for your personal development. That's your personal life that you come here to live. It's a story planned in advance. You have agreed, and then your agreement was blanked out from your memory, and you came here thinking this is your first time around, and everything's new and strange, and it's the joy of growing up again and finding your way back home. Going back home, finally touching base with home, is called awakening by some people, and it's a wonderful experience. And it's now available with two types of physical evidence to prove to you that it is not your imagination, not your delusion at all. And you'll be communicated with in dreams, an internal mentoring voice, and two types of physical evidence, surprisingly. And it's all available for free at truebluehealer.com. So have a quick look there. There's no rush to go there. You can go when you're ready. I know that most people are just too happy to remain in the dream of sleep, which is what most of us really are here until we awaken, because there's so many wonderful things to do in theme park Earth. However, we can suffer for our enjoyment of too much of the dream state of just believing everything at face value. So having said enough of that, I'll just remind you now at the end, 20 minutes at truebluehealer.com can teach you with immediate physical evidence that you have just been changed and your awakening has begun. Okay, it's a wonderful, thrilling experience. It cannot be repeated. So you're advised to keep a little notebook of your daily and weekly progress at the beginning, because one day you'll look back and you'll think, how could I ever have been like everybody else? How could I have ever been a sleepwalker? That's how much you can change in 6 months. Okay? That's called being awake, being awakened. Okay. So much to talk about in this action-packed modern world. The Trump era is a whole new level of activity politically. It seems to be showing the death throes of the left-wing, liberal, progressive, regressive communist movement, all that's infested the leadership of the Western world, the elites. It's kind of fascinating where they came from. Originally, left-wing people used to champion the cause of the working class. Do you remember that? Certainly I do in the 60s and the 70s. I always had to vote Labor because I didn't like the Conservatives, who seemed always to be in power, and we're always trying to lower our wages, you see. So in those days it was quite simple. Business didn't want high-wage employees. They wanted low-wage employees, you see. So you had no option in the 60s and the 70s than to vote basically Labor if you were born into the working class. And you had left-wing people telling you things you wanted to hear, that, fairness and equality, and we're going to redress the imbalance to make everything more equal, you see. That's very appealing to someone in teenage years, say people under 30 who are very malleable, very sort of gullible really, and so Marxism appeals. And Marxism is the underlying drive of most equality-based belief systems, I regret to say, and has entrenched itself all over the Western world, coming out of simple left-wing assistance with a poor suffering working class. That's what they tell you really are, and that gains some sympathy, and you can end up spending much of your life voting for Labor, which you think is a good thing to do because it really seems to be the only option, you see. So and that's the way I did, but slowly in the 80s and 90s I began to think, in the 90s social justice warriors began, that sort of thing. So I started to have second thoughts about, have I been gulled all of my life by skillful propagandists? And I think I was. And I think part of growing up is realising that the system is there waiting for you when you are born. and it's ready for you, and it can take you a long time to realise there's an automatic machine that feeds you stuff to think. About every aspect of existence, there's a machine there feeding you all the stuff you're supposed to think to suit the people in charge, the elites. Now, what happened to this? The Labor parties we had around the world that represented the working class against evil big business, which is forever trying to drive down wages and all that sort of stuff. What happened to them? Well, the left-wing elites, they're basically people with better vocabularies and better argument skills. They know more big words, and they always take an oppositional stance to everybody else to prove their superiority. But what actually happened to them? There's some time between the 80s and the 90s where they stopped supporting the working class and moved away from that issue, abandoned the working class and pursued power and personal wealth instead. And we grew all around the world. This left-wing elitist working class, former working class supporters, this liberal left-wing communist elite that's actually declared war on the working class. And they've entrenched themselves in local government, state government, federal governments, both sides of the political fence. We have a leftist Australian Conservative Prime Minister who just never stops worrying about gay marriage and pronouns and stuff like that. But people have slowly woken up over the last 20 years to the fact that it doesn't matter who you vote for, you get the same communist tripe, no matter what. Part of the process of left-wing elites moving toward personal profit and power over the proletariat, the suffering working masses, part of that has been the weaponised media that's... It's been noticed that it's so weaponised now that the mainstream media cannot speak the truth about anything. And simple fact-checking often undercuts just about everything said by the mainstream media. So they seem to be a dying arm of propaganda, a dying arm of cultural Marxism. One of the most telling things is how Donald Trump, with his recent executive order, he's had it stopped by a judge who apparently, and an appeals court judge also, who believes the rule of law can be set aside for the judge to insert his own political bias instead as a substitute for the Constitution. And Mark Dice has put this lovely video together where three former socialists, Bill Clinton, Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama, both complain about the damage done by illegal, undocumented immigrants infesting America, plugging into their welfare system. And all three of them say it, and then all three of them are now violently opposed to Donald Trump, who's doing exactly the same thing they did. Now, I don't know. I think this little video by Mark Dice could be shown to that judge in Washington that blocked the executive order. It's a wonderful video. I'll find it for you. I'll link it below this video. If you haven't seen it, you need to know about it. But the left is destroying itself with its hysteria, trying to maintain control by rage and anger and bullying, and standing for nothing but opposition to the current daily events. There's always a left-wing swing, which is just an oppositional alternative to unseat everybody and keep them off balance. But a high number of citizen journalists now explaining these things, such as Mark Dice and Paul Jones Watson. Is it Paul Watson Jones? I can never remember. I'm getting too old for this. Joseph Watson, that's what it is, yeah. They're taking apart mainstream media, and for that reason, some other people who are extremely good commentators and clearly better than most television commentators. There's a fellow called Mr. Cullen from Ireland, and he seems to sit in front of a computer watching news and rebroadcasting it with his own personal spin. And he's a very good, spontaneous and smooth speaker. He's not always reading what he says, and he is so successful. He's more successful than any television presenter, and he's been permanently demonetised. Did you hear that? He's been permanently demonetised in an attempt to cripple him. So that's how dangerous citizen journalists have become. They are replacing mainstream media. The worst one is CNN, which has now got, I believe, something like a 7% approval rating, which means it's approaching ratings death. Advertisers won't be putting their money there soon. So we could see entire networks closing down and citizen journalists taking over for the news of the day and the best, most practical, common sense spin on it. And citizen journalists are certainly making great inroads into putting to sleep the cultural Marxism, because ultimately it's running out of places to go. It has nowhere to go. Its duplicity and utter mendacity has rendered it completely lacking in credibility. And now people are so good at spotting cultural Marxists lying as they do every day of their political life, their cultural life, that people are now very good at classifying people's statements as cultural Marxism practically in a few seconds just by listening to a video clip. Can I bring to your attention a recent video just came out? It's a Paul Joseph Watson video, and he talks about weaponised culture, where the culture that young people grow up in, where the system's ready for you. You grow up, you're 1, 2, 3, 4 years old. You've got to find your way through it. You've got to learn to live with this culture. And he points out the many, many toxic themes of our modern culture for about the last 30 years. And he's absolutely, dare I say, brilliant at encapsulating it in a series of very nice throwaway lines, hard-hitting, that sort of thing. It certainly makes you think and realise how you have, if you got to my age, 60-something, and you have not been greatly affected by this weaponised, sick, vacuous, toxic culture that we live in. And he's talking about entertainment, Hollywood and social media stuff, where you get people with no talent whatsoever who become famous for being famous. And it's certainly true about Paul Joseph Watson, what he's saying. Now this touches on a very serious issue. Some people will write off Paul Joseph Watson as controlled opposition, therefore you shouldn't listen to him. But can I ask you to think one step beyond that? And that is, the only way you can get big anywhere in media, Hollywood or even social media, seems to be if you're a raving Zionist. This was just proven recently in Britain, where the Israeli embassy pays people to go pyramid selling Zionism, and you basically find someone who looks good in a suit who's potentially a good presenter on television in 20 years' time, and you think, well, he's so bright and such a good flowing speaker and he's got political ideas, he's malleable, he's under 25, and he could end up in Parliament. We'll groom him and give him parliamentary training, and it all starts with a trip to Israel, right? And you join a little club, and they start paying you a stipend, an income, for recruiting more Zionists. So basically it's selling Zionism via pyramid selling, and the more Zionists you find, more money you get, and you go up, you're rising up the tree of an imaginary organisation where you think you're powerful, you've got influence, you get money, and what it means is that the entire crop of young people who might become British MPs, either side of the political fence, liberal or conservative, they're all going to be staunch friends of Israel since their early 20s. What that means is British politics is entirely Jewish controlled. Okay, so if you don't do that, if you try to be independent, you get basically nowhere in politics. Okay, because I regret to say this, but there's left-wing cultural Marxist media such as the BBC. You'll never get on the BBC with your throwaway statement. with your brilliantly crafted, clever speech that you've been practicing 15 years before you got into Parliament, trained in Zionist talk circles. You've done all this practice recruiting other people with clever Zionist lines. And if you're a raving Zionist, you're going to make it onto the BBC. If you are not, you'll never be heard from. You get no chance of getting any airplay in major media, including social media, it seems. Because if you try to start up there as an independent, you'll be demonised. That sort of thing. So to get ahead, you don't have much choice except at least paying lip service to Zionism. Although Zionism is the cause of so much sorrow and grief and suffering, it seems to be the only way to go if you want to have a career. So when you're young and naive in your early to mid-20s and you'd like to make a difference and you're clever, you've got a degree in this and a degree in that, and you excel at English elocution, that sort of thing, and flowing statements, well, you get a big boost by being picked up by Zionists and recruited as one of them, and you spend the rest of your life recruiting more Zionists in the pyramid selling scheme. The problem being that British politics then becomes completely owned and operated by Zionist Jews, okay? Now, to be a Zionist, you don't have to be Jewish, by the way. You can be a raving Anglo-Saxon Christian who believes all the propaganda written into the Schofield Bible in America, which is completely owned and operated and printed by Jews. And there's all these little footnotes in the Schofield Bible that the US Bible Belt reads, saying that you must be friendly toward Jewish people and you must revere them because they're God's chosen. All these little footnotes, which keep multiplying in the Schofield Bible every year, comes out. There's more and more statements praising Jews in the sidebars and the bottom and the footnotes, etc. So, what's this got to do with Paul Joseph Watson? Well, a lot. The reason I bring all that up about you can't get anywhere unless you're a Zionist, Geert Wilders is a Zionist. He has to be. He gets flown around the world. His expenses are picked up by Zionist money. He's running the anti-Muslim cause in Holland. And so is another raving Zionist is Marine Le Pen in France. She's another rising hero. And why are all these people raving Zionists? Well, they have to be to get a voice, to get a word out. You've got to be part of the Jewish production called modern media. You've got to be a Zionist just to get on television, that sort of thing, basically, right? So Paul Joseph Watson is another example of, he's been asked humorously and pointedly put to the test and failed the test dramatically. He knew in advance he was going to be asked the most pointed question about Jews, and rather humorous, he put these special glasses on so he could lie better to the camera. They had special Jewish filters on them so that when he was asked the question, he knew it was coming. For just this video, he wore very thick Mr. Magoo glasses. And for once in this video, he didn't have a fixed stare at the camera where he's forcibly telling you stuff that you need to know. Are you listening to me? He wasn't doing that in this video because the commentator just said to him, the radio disc jockey, just said, so what do you think about the Jewish influence controlling the media, you see? Well, immediately, Mr. Magoo, Paul Joseph Watson, broke eye contact with the camera and started looking bloody well everywhere like this. He's looking, I can't see any Jews here. No, I've never seen Jews. As far as I know, they don't exist. You don't notice them, you know. They're invisible. And he's looking down at the desk, sideways at the cameraman. He's looking the other way and all this. And finally, at the end, he realises he's overdone it. He's completely avoided the camera because he knows he's lying. And the glasses remain on, and he tries to do like a fixed, forceful stare at the camera to finish the statement that he can't see any Jews anywhere, and he's had a good look around while he's sitting there in the interview. So, it's humorous to watch that. Now, don't write him off for doing that, okay? I think it's the only way he can survive, like Geert Wilders, like Marine Le Pen, like even Jeremy Corbyn. The whole Labour Party is completely Jewish owned and operated. There's certain things you cannot say, and one of them is the J word. Now, Paul Joseph Watson just put out this wonderful video where he complains vociferously and succinctly about the toxic effects of weaponised culture, where you wake up in the morning and you get nothing but depressing news from the most vacuous, crude, vulgar, useless entertainers. And that's all you get. And the whole idea is written up in Jewish philosophy a long time ago. You can find it written in 1936, for goodness sake, in a book called The Ass and the Lion's Skin. It's about depressing the Western world and removing from them any joy of life, any satisfaction. And so mass producing everything and not letting you have the satisfaction of making it yourself or helping to produce it yourself is all part of the degradation of the Western world. That's written about in 1936. Okay, it's amazing. So cultural Marxism started a long time ago and you weren't aware of it, and you were born into the system and you're a newborn, you think you haven't been here before, everything is new, and you've got to find your way through it. Paul Joseph Watson does a masterful job of presenting to you how toxic modern culture is to your personal being, that there's really nothing nice to look forward to. And the intention is to make it continually worse and worse and worse, so that you don't think life's worth living and really you should be suiciding maybe. The growing suicide rate is something that Mr. Ignatieff, who is a Jewish philosopher, says that really every white Anglo-Saxon should suicide to do the world a favour, quite seriously. And then we've got, what's this woman, Sarah Silverman, who's a natural, like so many Jewish people, she's a natural anarchist, wants to overthrow the government of her host nation that tolerates her so kindly. She wants to destroy everything. They haven't changed in 100 years, because that was written by Winston Churchill, 1920, in a Sunday news item. I'll find a link for you below this video. So we've got the usual spectrum of Jews making up left and right-wing Jews and a couple of strands in between, people who seem to be controlled opposition and saying things that you like to hear, you want to hear, but they're all Jews. You notice this. So they're controlling the entire narrative of modern cultural discourse, and it ain't pretty. We're suffering for it dramatically. So much I can tell you. Did you know that rap music, I've got a couple of links for you here, I'll dig them up. Did you know that rap music was deliberately produced to replace and overwrite Motown music? Do you ever remember Motown music disappearing? Where did it go? You know, Dionne Warwick and the Supremes and all that beautiful music they did produce, it just sort of faded away, didn't it? Michael Jackson was part of it. And it just faded away and it was replaced by ugly gangster rap music. Well, the reason that was inserted was by Jewish interests buying up Motown music. And the idea was to celebrate a crime-filled life, drugs and treating women like animals. And the object was to drive more young black men into prison, where warehousing criminals is a profit-making industry in the United States. It's no coincidence that America's got the biggest jail population in the world and the most profitable jail population in the world. So we're being attacked at every level, in song, in lasciviousness, that sort of thing, lewdness, perversion, pornography. We're attacked on all fronts from getting up in the morning, all of us. So, and that's cultural Marxism. Now, Paul Watson goes to some great length in this spectacular video where he delineates it very nicely, and he even tells you where it's coming from. But because of his Jewish masters, his Zionist payback he's always got to do no matter what he says, he avoids using the J word in his latest spectacular video, but he does point to where it comes from. And it's almost like he's saying to you, it all comes from here, one place. I can't say the J word, but I'm going to tell you that all this cultural Marxism comes from one place. That's the Frankfurt Institute, which was an entirely Jewish institution dedicated to the destruction of civilization. And that's what Winston Churchill called it in 1920. And that's what it is now. Nothing's changed. And Paul Joseph Watson sort of dances around, showing you in a very colourful way how revolting cultural Marxism is, how poisonous, how toxic it is, how destructive it is, and where it all comes from. A Jewish institute in the 1920s, which later migrated to America, to Columbia University. It's still there today as far as I know. But of course Paul Joseph Watson can't say that it's Jews who are the source of all this, but he points at it quite openly, quite, dare I say, pointedly, and lets you make up your own mind. So you can fill in the one blank, the J word, yourself. And I think he's doing his very best to tell you that you need to know this, but he can't say the word to keep his position of power in the media, his position of influence. He wants to keep it, and he's telling you as much as he can get away with. I wouldn't be surprised if that video is pulled. So I would suggest you download it and keep it. Okay, for his sake as well as yours. Keep him there, but beware. I suspect he'd like to tell you more than he currently is. But he's telling you, as near as damn it to, the problem starts in this one building called the Frankfurt Institute in Germany, founded in 1923 by communist Marxist Jews. Okay? So I can say the J word, and that's why I will go nowhere in media. You understand? It's an automatic, you don't get an entry, you don't get a pass into any sizable media influence if you use the J word freely. So there I am, deliberately keeping out of the club. Okay, so one thing you cannot call me is a Zionist shill. So I don't think we can completely dismiss the Zionist shills. You have to discern what they're saying very carefully. And I'm urging you to watch this Paul Joseph Watson video and make your own discernment of it. What's the total message he's telling you, and the source of it that you need to know about, but he can't name it as the J word institution. Okay? I had a personal experience recently, and it greatly illustrated to me the toxic nature of our culture that's forced upon us by available music that you grow into from an early age. You don't see it coming until it's in your face, and you think it's normal because there's nothing else there. So you become conditioned to it, right? And somehow I managed to avoid all this. I never liked rock music, never liked electric guitar music, never liked drugs and rock and roll or anything like that. And what's wrong with me? But I always liked conservative music, Baroque music and stuff like that. I'm just funny that way, I guess. But recently, in the last few months, I went into a computer shop and I was shopping around trying to get some cheap computer bits that I needed, a usual thing like we all do, browsing for the latest gadgets and things. And there was some god-awful music, ugly, screaming, hellish music, satanic music, seemingly celebrating suffering and rage and anger. It was so revolting, very loud in the shop it was too. And it actually took my mind off what I was doing. And I was thinking of walking out of the shop, and I found a young man wearing a badge, and I just said, look, could you turn that damn music off? It's terrible, it's going to scare away the customers. And he came back with, oh, I find that very soothing. He said, I find that very soothing. Ugly, raging, screaming, raging rock music with electronically altered satanic voices, basically connoting agony in every syllable they utter. And it's a musical sort of depiction of hell, of tortured souls, as far as I could see. That's the deep emotional impression this ugly music made on me. But the young man, when I said to him, turns out he'd put it on himself, he said he found that very soothing. Right? So what a totally opposite reaction his was to mine. Now, there's more to this. We had a little conversation. while the music's playing, he turned it down a bit. He couldn't turn it off. And I said to him, he told me that he was in fact a musician. He could play 8 to 10 musical instruments. He was in a rock band, and he spent a lot of time listening to this disgusting, ugly, poisonous music that suggested anger and rage and being basically tortured in hell or something. That's what it sounded like to me. And he found that soothing. So he's obviously a bright young fellow. So I put my idea to him that it must serve, or it must be playing to a need for angry young people, teenagers, who are full of anger and resistance to authority and wanting to escape from their parents and set up their own nest somewhere, that it's a way of playing to that rebelliousness and that rejection of all the values around them. And this is possibly why some young people commit suicide, because it has too great an effect on them. But he said he curiously found this satanic music, which was shocking to listen to. He found it soothing. So, and I put it to him and he agreed. I said, so this ugly, screaming, raging music is, for you, it's working as a pacifier, which is code for a dummy, for an angry child. He agreed with me. And we talked for a few more minutes, and he finally turned the music off. But that's a personal experience about how toxic music can do so much damage to society. That's just a little personal experience I thought I'd relate to you. And I no doubt you've heard it and probably glossed over it and ignored it, but it's there just about everywhere you go. You hear it in cars driving past, you know, thump, thump, thump. Very, very loud satanic music in cars. And this is what Paul Joseph Watson's talking about. Every minute of your existence is poisoned. They're not doing you a favour by playing this kind of ugly music to you. As a lesson in controlled opposition, someone you can learn a lot from, but bear in mind, as usual, they have a muzzle. They can't say certain words, can't do certain subjects. And even the venerable David Duke, who has something like 1 billion views on his YouTube channel and a global audience of massive proportion, he exposes basically Jewish subversion, historically, that sort of thing. And it's a good lesson. It's an unbelievable lesson in why one ethnic group, which takes life a little bit more seriously than Western people, they're more determined and think about the long-term plan to destroy everything around them, and put themselves in charge of the ruins, the Mad Max ruins they hope to control one day. Even David Duke, the venerable exposer of Jewish perfidy and Jewish subversion, which has been going on a long time, there's certain subjects he won't talk about either, and one of them is 9/11 and the fact that Jews played a major role in that, such as Dov Zakheim and robot-controlled planes that were sold for a very, very low price to America and outfitted with fuel tanks, that sort of thing. And Dov Zakheim was a raving Zionist, of course, with a name like that. And his company actually produced robot-controlled planes, which can do 400 knot turns, 270 degrees, and hit a building with absolute precision in the very place you want to hit it. That sort of thing. So David Duke, who might be your hero, and he's always worth listening to, but bear in mind he can't tell you the whole story. So it looks like he is controlled opposition too. Is there anyone? I don't think so. I can't think of anyone who's not controlled opposition. Even that fellow, that Englishman, George something or other, he's a raving Zionist too, though he pretends not to be. He's got a Scottish accent. I can't recall his name now. I'll put it on screen. He's a fervent worshipper of the Holocaust, but he has to be, because I believe he can be jailed for Holocaust denial. So he's got to preach the Holocaust. He generally supports Palestinians, but He's only tolerated because he's controlled opposition, Zionist opposition. So basically Zionists want to control the whole media conversation, left and right and all the strands in between. And wouldn't the world be a nice place with no Zionists? Wouldn't it be nice if they just stayed in Israel? And the world is moving toward segregation as being a better way of managing the planet by keeping people in their lands of origin. So that's the way we're slowly going, and I think it makes sense. It's been pointed out by, here's another case of controlled opposition. Stefan Molyneux puts a lovely lecture together, he always does. He's got the high verbal Ashkenazi IQ, very convincing, very entertaining, theatrical speaker, presenter. He points out, can you believe this? It must be true, he says it with such zeal, that it's 10 times cheaper to help refugees where they are. Whether they're refugees or just suffering economically, it's 10 times cheaper to help them where they are by us becoming colonialist again, going in there, putting stuff in their infrastructure, etc. He points it out. Now, he's Jewish, and he's telling you what you want to hear, but he's a controlled Jewish opposition, controlled Zionist opposition again, you see. But that's the way the world's going. So they think they're moulding and crafting everyone's thoughts. To a large degree they are, but you can wake up from this and realise that it's the blend of being theatrical that makes Jewish people happy to lie, because they're not really lying. They're doing lines on the international Zionist stage that they have created. So they do a great delivery like Stefan Molyneux. It sounds convincing. It's very grasping and entrancing when he speaks to you. And take him with a grain of salt. Be careful. You've always got to be discerning with these people. Because he's got this almost fetid, feeble-minded explanation of everything deep down, and it keeps cropping up now and again. All the world's problems are due to women making wrong choices about men they choose to cross with, to sleep with, to produce babies. It's all women's fault. Now, otherwise, apart from that, you'd think he's a very bright person, claims to be a trained philosopher. But that, to me, seems downright feeble-minded and, psychopathic to me. Terribly overly simplistic, smacking of Asperger's or something. But apart from that, just bear that in mind, that he's controlled opposition too. Although he's undoubtedly played a role in the election of Donald Trump, he's got a spectacular number of subscribers and listeners. So all of these people, no matter how entrancing they are, Paul Joseph Watson, Stefan Molyneux, you've got to take them all with a grain of salt and realise you've got to keep drawing the boundaries about what they will not speak about. Okay, there's always that bit that you've got to fill in yourself, and that gives you the fun of discerning truth from reality, which is really about all that life's all about, okay? And that's why I give you that message very early on in the picture that you completely forget when I talk about layman's gnosis and how you can be led toward truths by having websites, web addresses, keywords, even music and people's contact details dumped into your mind's eye to assist you to discern truth from reality. When we seem to be living in a world of 99% mendacity, don't we? Created illusion created by the Zionist media globally. But I think it's coming to an end. I really think communism's running out of a place to go. And I think the left-wing elites who chase power and personal fortune and scream about open borders but live in gated communities all over the Western world, driving their luxury cars, I think their time is nigh. And what's coming soon is a revolution which Zionists love. And it just happens to be 2017, the anniversary of 1917, where 30 to 60 million good Russian Christians were holocausted. Okay? So, don't be surprised if similar revolutionary things begin now. This year, 2017, and the advent of Donald Trump is probably not an accident. Okay? Certainly Hillary Clinton in 2017 wanted to produce an executive order doing house-to-house searches, seizing weapons from Texans, etc., personal weapons from Americans with an executive order, and using painted white armoured cars from the United Nations to seize all the weapons, you see. And that's a revolutionary move done by Zionists. The Clinton Foundation is utterly Zionistic, completely Zionist. So I hope I've given you a lot to think about, and I want you all to practice this discernment of what people say and what they don't say curiously, and how there's a pattern to what they will never say and certain issues they will never converse about. So I think I've given you probably too much today. I hope I've entertained you a little bit, and I welcome your comments beneath this video, and I'll put some useful links. And you can joust with me if you like and say I'm wrong, I've got it all wrong. But you watch Paul Joseph Watson, and he's pointing silently at Jewish subversion as the root cause of cultural Marxism in 1923 in the Frankfurt Institute, which later moved to Columbia University. I better leave you now while you've still got some ears left. Okay, ta-ta.